In 1901, sponge divers pulled a lump of corroded bronze out of a Roman shipwreck near a tiny Greek island. For decades it sat in a museum drawer, ignored, mistaken for a broken statue fragment. Then someone finally X-rayed it. Inside were 30 interlocking gears, cut with a precision no one expected from the ancient world. It was a machine built to predict eclipses, more than 2,000 years before anything like it appears again in human history. And the strangest part is not that they built it. It's that we are still arguing, right now in 2026, about whether it actually worked. Here is the part that should worry you a little. We do not just lack an explanation for this one machine. Scattered across the ancient world are 3 more objects like it: a battery with no manual, a concrete that heals its own cracks, a blade nobody can fully reproduce today. Each one is real, sitting in a real museum, built by people who clearly knew exactly what they were doing. And every single time, whatever they knew walked out the door with them, and simply never got written down. Start with that bronze lump from the shipwreck, now called the Antikythera Mechanism. Once researchers reconstructed it, they found a hand-cranked device that tracked the sun, the moon, and the 5 planets visible to the naked eye. It predicted lunar and solar eclipses years in advance, and even displayed the 4-year cycle of the ancient Olympic Games. The next machine with anything close to this gear complexity does not show up in Europe until the 14th century. That is a gap of over 1,300 years. Something with this level of engineering simply should not exist that early, and yet it was sitting on the floor of the Mediterranean the whole time. But here is the twist that most retellings skip. In 2025, a team of researchers ran a computer simulation, deliberately built to include the small manufacturing errors visible in the real gears. Their conclusion was uncomfortable. The imperfections may have been severe enough that the mechanism would have jammed constantly, like a printer that never quite works right. Some now argue it may have functioned more like an elaborate mechanical toy or teaching model than a precision instrument used for real predictions. 2,000 years later, we still cannot agree on whether this machine actually did the one job it was built for. Look closely at those teeth, each one hand-cut, evenly spaced, meshing into the next like they were stamped by a factory that wouldn't exist for another millennium. Whoever made this was a genius. Nobody argues about that. The argument is stranger. That machine is sitting in a glass case in Athens tonight. You could go stand in front of it tomorrow, and not one expert in that building could look you in the eye and promise you it ever actually worked. A device built to read the heavens, and it has left us completely unable to read it. But a machine is one thing. What they pulled out of the ground next barely makes sense at all. Picture an archaeologist, 1938, brushing dry Iraqi soil off a plain clay jar. Nothing special, until he looks inside. A copper tube, an iron rod, wrapped together in a way that shouldn't mean anything 2,000 years ago. So a modern researcher does the obvious thing. He fills a copy with vinegar, and a needle twitches. It makes electricity, a small current humming out of a jar older than most of recorded history. Nobody is saying the ancient world had power lines, but hold that image for a second. Someone back then built the shape of a battery, and left no note explaining why. Some think it plated jewelry with gold. Some think it did nothing electrical at all, and we are just seeing our own world reflected back at us. And that is the quiet horror running under all of this. It is like finding a single key worn smooth from use with no lock anywhere in sight. It clearly opened something, and everyone who knew what is long gone. The next one, though, you can still walk on today. Roman concrete. Structures like the Pantheon and Roman seawalls have survived 2,000 years, many sitting directly in salt water the whole time. Modern marine concrete can start crumbling within decades under the same conditions. For years, this looked like a simple recipe: volcanic ash, lime, seawater. But recent studies found small white mineral chunks inside, long dismissed as sloppy mixing. When cracks form, water reacts with those chunks and grows new crystals, sealing the crack from the inside. The Romans may have accidentally built a material that heals itself. We are only now starting to understand how. Last, a blade. And this one doesn't just lose its manual, it vanishes. Damascus steel, forged from Wootz steel out of India, famous for a cutting edge sharp enough to slice silk, according to old accounts, while flexible enough to bend without snapping. Under a microscope it shows bands of carbon nanotubes, a structure nobody on Earth had the tools to see or design on purpose at the time. Then the ore ran out, the trade routes collapsed, and by the 1800s, the last person who truly knew how to make it was already dead. Modern metallurgists have gotten close. Nobody has ever fully brought it back. 4 objects, same wound each time. It is not that ancient people were secretly more advanced than us. It is that knowledge is fragile in a way we rarely think about. A skill can live perfectly in one generation's hands, past master to apprentice with no written record, and just end when a war cuts a trade route, when a master dies without training anyone, when one specific ore runs out. Humanity does not always climb steadily upward. Sometimes it climbs, drops something on the way, and does not notice for 1,000 years. None of this is evidence of lost advanced civilizations or ancient aliens, the internet's favorite shortcut whenever old objects look impressive. Every one of these fits inside known ancient skill, applied with unusual precision and a lot of trial and error. The truth is smaller than that, and somehow worse. We are holding the objects in our hands. We just lost the instructions. And with the Antikythera Mechanism, we are not even certain it did what we assumed for over a century. Which says something a little uncomfortable about right now. We treat progress as permanent, safe forever, backed up, unlosable. But the Baghdad Battery had no user guide. Self-healing Roman concrete sat unexplained in plain sight for 2,000 years. Real Damascus steel vanished in a few generations once one supply chain broke. Knowledge is not a possession, it is a performance, repeated generation after generation, and it survives only as long as someone keeps repeating it correctly. So think about that bronze lump, sitting quietly in a museum drawer for decades before anyone ever looked closely enough to see the gears hidden inside. How many things are we building right now that we understand perfectly well today, that some future version of us will dig up in 1,000 years and simply fail to explain? Not because we were not clever enough to build them, but because somewhere between now and then, someone forgot to write it down. Maybe the real ancient mystery was never how they built these things. It is how something built this well gets forgotten at all.